The grossest aspect of the personality is the body. Subtler than the body is the mind. Subtler than the mind is the intellect. Intellect is also broken up into two components, as it were. The gross intellect and the subtle intellect. Okay, the basic function of the intellect is to discriminate. Fundamentally what it does. It recognizes a thing from something that it is not. So one of the ways that we describe this is that it plies between the pairs of opposites. So the gross intellect has this function of discrimination. What it does is it discriminates between the pairs of opposites that comprise the world, your world. All right? And so there are an infinite number of pairs of opposites. Hot, cold, black, white, right, wrong, etc. All of these different pairs of opposites. The area that we talk about that the gross intellect functions is called the terrestrial. Anything that has quality, property, form, function, change, just as a way of describing it. So if you can point to something and it has a property or it has a particular quality, has a form, it has a function, or if it can change, it constitutes the terrestrial world. It's used, the gross intellect is used to manage worldly affairs, as we covered. So we use the gross intellect to manage the mind. The way that we manage the mind is through thinking, through questioning. So the management of the mind is, as we have discussed at other times, it is the redirection of a thought flow. The question is, how do you redirect a thought flow? You can't simply say, change. There's something that we have to actually do to the mind or with the mind in order to redirect that flow. What we are doing, or rather what the intellect is doing, is questioning the emotions, questioning the thoughts, and then questioning their value, questioning their direction, and discriminating, is that where I want my mind to go? Is that going to be productive for my goals? So the whole idea of redirecting the mind is only the questioning and the discrimination of the mind and its activity. So this is why we say we use the gross intellect to manage our worldly affairs. And as we've covered in all of these other sessions, managing the worldly affairs means managing one's own mind. And so from that we gain material success, harmonious relationships, and a relative inner peace.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
The part that you talk about infinite pairs of opposites.
Yeah.
We act based on our likes and dislikes.
Yes.
And then we constantly deal with the world of opposites, meaning healthy, sickness, tall, short. It cannot exist without it. And not supposedly, a human being is the only creature that can experience the pairs of opposites without potentially not being affected by it. How would one go through life and not act according to their likes and dislikes? Meaning, automatically, if you don't like something, you're not going to go towards that.
Well, you may or you may not. The idea of acting apart from likes and dislikes simply means that you don't allow the likes and dislikes to make the choice for you.
Okay.
Sometimes what you like to do is also what your intellect recognizes as the right thing to do.
But you just said sometimes.
Yes, and
Okay.
Sometimes what you like to do is what your intellect says is the wrong thing for me to do.
I get that, like eating sweet when you're diabetic. So the concept boils down to use your intellect. Go according to, if it doesn't have any implications.
No, he's not saying go according to your like. Go according to your intellect. There will be times when it happens to coincide with your likes.
Okay.
That's just a happy coincidence.
Okay, so what happens if you find out that 90% of whatever you do is what you like and it works out?
Then you're in a pretty sweet place, because it means that you can follow your intellect and it conforms to your likes. Good. So this is the whole notion, though. It's that we allow them, or rather we get the intellect to make the decision of the next action rather than the likes and dislikes of the mind. And if it coincides, great. If it doesn't, that's also great.
Is also the purpose that if you happen to like something and the universe doesn't provide that to you, for you not to be affected by it?
Yeah, this is another way of saying the same thing. So you'll use your intellect to guide your thinking, to guide your attention to whatever you have decided is the most appropriate. If as you say, if the environment isn't catering to your likes, you'll be less affected by it because you're not caught up in your likes. You are now identifying with your obligations and the goals that your intellect has set for yourself that you know are in your best interests. So if you know you're functioning towards your best interests, the fact that the environment isn't catering to your likes, it doesn't really affect you that much anymore. It's only when you're caught up in your likes and dislikes that when the world doesn't cater to them, then you get affected.
So the intellect is really very much depends on the individual's personality. For instance, an entrepreneur may risk all his money in discovering something new. Mm-hmm. His intellect may say, look, you're risking everything, but some part of him says, I want to do this. And he's willing to take that chance, and his life is as such. Another person will say, I will never risk everything for the sake of discovering something new, and he will make that person. But his life may be dull for him because he has the confidence, security, yet none of those things that appeals to his personality. So is intellect according to individual?
The choice that you make should be based on your own temperament. What is right for me? Best example is when it comes to the selection of colleges. All right, we want our boy, our girl to get into the best school. There's no such thing as the best school. There's only such a thing as the best fit. Best fit for that particular child's temperament, what they want out of life, what they want out of a study, and so on and so forth.
Am I thinking correctly by thinking that, okay, your intellect has already decided, or their job should be to decide what your meaning of your life is, what your values are, and based on that values you set your goals. So as you develop your value, then you recognize and you try to identify with that which you value rather than your likes and dislikes.
Yeah, so you identify with, as you were saying, your obligations. So the obligations are based upon the roles that I have in life and the goals that I have in life. Roles and goals. What am I? I'm an entrepreneur. It's my obligation to give my nature an expression. If I'm an entrepreneur, it's going against my obligation to sit in a sort of 9-to-5 job, playing with spreadsheets. I should not do that. No one should do that. And I recognize my nature is that, so therefore I should not pick that particular lifestyle. What am I? I'm a father, I'm a son, I'm a student, I'm a whatever. What's the goal that I have for my life? I want to be such and such. So those things, the roles and goals that we have, determine the obligations for us in life. When we do that, we are disconnecting from likes and dislikes, because what the like and the dislike is saying is, I like that, therefore I should do it, or I dislike it, therefore I should not do it. It seems like it's a conclusion. It's not a conclusion. It's not a therefore. The word therefore is misused here. A conclusion is what you get at the end of a chain of reasoning. So the disconnection from likes and dislikes simply means choosing what is in your best interests rather than what your mind wants in the moment. Because every action is a cause that's going towards an outcome. Well, I'm putting in causes all the time, which means I'm going to be accruing outcomes all the time. Are the outcomes that I'm accruing in harmony with the outcomes that I recognize are in my best interests? That includes the environment in which I live. So you can take a simple example. It's in my company's best interest to stay profitable. So what do? I cut corners on safety, and I cut corners on my pollution management, and I pollute my environment, and I harm my workers. But my company's becoming very profitable at the expense of an environment which actually supports my own activities.
So your roles, again, so your goals are based on your values, and your roles are really based on your vasanas.
Roles are also based on your values. So if you choose to be something, say you choose to be you want to go into a career of a particular type, right? You want to be a business manager. That's also based on values, and it's also based upon your vasanas, your temperament. So any choice you make is going to be always based on your values because it's going in a particular direction. And so we are understood values to be beliefs. So I make a choice based upon what I believe to be a worthwhile endeavor. That's my values. If I believe something to be a worthwhile endeavor, it means that's my value. But it's, as you say, yes, it's also based on your vasanas, your temperament, your role.
So is it safe to say that when someone talks about value, like she was saying, it's almost like, at least in the society, a value establishes what's a good value versus bad. But when you talk about temperament, it's something that adheres to an individual. There's no good or bad in it. It's what it is.
Well, I mean, yeah, your temperament simply means the inclinations that make up your personality. Some of them are good and some of them are bad. You can certainly say that's the case. But good and bad with respect to what? Good and bad with respect to your own well-being. So I have temperament, I have inclinations, I have vasanas, which, if expressed, will be detrimental to my well-being. I have to make sure that I recognize what those are and either inhibit them in a way which does not get into suppression, or perhaps give them some sort of expression which is at least benign, if not beneficial.
I got you.
So, excuse me.
Okay, second type of intellect is the subtle intellect. So whereas the first, or the gross intellect, deals in the terrestrial, the subtle intellect posits the transcendental, anything which has no quality, property, form, function, or change. So the gross intellect has this multitude of pairs of opposites that it functions within. The subtle intellect has only one pair of opposites. That is the terrestrial and not terrestrial. This is the distinction that the subtle intellect makes. The other phrases or words that we use to describe this thing, which is without any sort of quality or property, is reality, self, and God. So this is the function of the subtle intellect. Where the function of the gross intellect is to manage worldly affairs, the function of the subtle intellect is used to identify with the inner self. When we say the inner self, we mean that part of the personality that isn't defined in terms of quality, property, form, function, or change. So when we're talking about the inner self, it's clearly not the physical body. When we're talking about the inner self, we're also not talking about our feelings, because our feelings have all of these aspects to them. They have a particular quality and property. Our feelings also change. We're also not talking about our values, because our values have quality to them. This person has low quality values, this person has high quality values. Our values change over time. So the inner self is transcendent of these aspects of the personality. The difficulty, of course, is that it's nearly impossible for us to conceive of something that doesn't have quality or property or form.